Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this afternoon I'm delighted to be joined by Patrick McGilp to talk all things Celtic. Patrick, last time we spoke, we were both very bitterly disappointed. We had just witnessed a 6-0 humping at the hands of Atletico Madrid, and all the questions were flying around are, about Celtic and being ill-prepared for a Champions League, and, were we in a position even to get to a point where we could, avoid these kind of humblings, Patrick. And it's interesting how much difference a week makes. We've got a wee bit more of a spring in our step after the weekend. What does it do for you, Patrick, after the disappointment of last Tuesday?
Yeah, it's sort of, time is a great healer, and you can sort of look at it in the cold light of day, and you've got the emotions sort of stripped back, and you can look at it and say to yourself, well, I think Rodgers probably is correct. I think if you don't get the man sent off, I don't think you lose 6-0. I think I think you're definitely still going to get beat. The quality of opposition, Celtic away from home in Europe, I think there's very little chance of getting a result from that game. But I think the ludicrous VAR decision to send my head off totally spoils the game, and you go from losing maybe 2 or 3-0 to 6 or 7, and
Yeah.
it really was a depressing night. But then to have our own 6-0 humping on Sunday was certainly cheered us all up somewhat, and to get so many different people in the score sheet. Yang getting his first goal, Turnbull scoring. As much as he might not be good enough for the starting 11, as much as he might be quite slow, I'm a big Turnbull fan. I always have been, and the amount of goals he gets coming off the bench, playing the odd sort of SPFL game, you can't underestimate how important that is. We lost the league famously by a single goal in 2003, so goal difference certainly counts. So to rack up these goals is very important. I think he's hitting a bit of form. He played really, really well at Ross County, got an important goal against St Mirren, got two in the last few minutes at the weekend there. And it sort of gives you a spring in your step when the international break, bit of positivity. And we've got a quite good run now, right into the new year before the winter break. So hopefully we can have a bit more positivity until between now and New Year's Day.
Yes, definitely. I think this is our third international break of the season. Am I right in saying that? Third international
I
break.
think so, yeah.
And people often say to me on the socials, what are you going to speak about for the next week or two? Well, there's always loads to talk about when it comes to Celtic. We are going to be looking at where we are at this stage of the season, and of course, Brendan Rodgers' second tenure at Celtic Park. How is that transfer window looking now at this stage of the season as well? And as the headline would suggest, why the narrative on futures of O'Riley and Rodgers is predictably skewed. Let's start off with that one, shall we? Before we get into the nitty gritty of the squad and who's performing well, Patrick. It's the same old here, right? And back in the day where a story would run and there was almost no right to reply. People, it was propaganda basically. There was so limited kind of platforms and vehicles for word to get out there that when something appeared in the tabloid press or on mainstream broadcastable TV, it was believed. It was gospel, Patrick. But now we're in an age where, media is, for me, much better in that you can do your own research, you can make up your own mind on the narrative that's being pushed. And of course, you have freelance journalists, you've got fan and alternative media who are willing to give you a different take on what is being put out there as gospel. And in the last couple of weeks, actually, I mean, I know it's been there for decades and probably since the beginning of time, but in the last couple of weeks, it's been ramped up, Patrick, And I remember going through a period where just about every single day I seen a story about some world-renowned footballer who somehow a mainstream platform in Scotland had got an interview with, and their narrative, their agenda, their angle was, did you nearly sign for Rangers? And there was like all these stories for weeks on end, right, when Rangers were absolute garbage about, I nearly signed for Roberto Baggio, nearly signed for Rangers. That was almost that ridiculous and that predictable. And by the way, we're not getting any better, Patrick. Some of the narrative that I'm looking at, Matt O'Reilly's talking about taking a step and another step in his career onto the international stage, and somehow by the time that makes it, I say into print, but onto the blogs, he wants to leave Celtic. One of the longest serving broadcasters who has commented on Scottish football for decades, Hugh Keevans, doesn't think Brendan Rodgers should be the manager of Celtic next season. It's an abomination, isn't it? The whole setup. And I know that often fan media, is looked at with suspicion and cynicism, Patrick. But I'll tell you something, there's honesty. Yeah, there's loads of emotion, but there's honesty in it. And you can see right through these narratives, can't you?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you've seen that emotion, certainly on Acsom, during the 10 in a row, or the not to be 10 in a row season. We had plenty of arguments on here, and we still do disagree with each other, and it can get heated at times after disappointing results. But it is just all our own opinions. We're all just Celtic fans talking about the game, giving our views, having a discussion, and people obviously appreciate that. There's different fan media for Celtic, different fan media for all these different clubs, and it's thriving because people are so sick of these, clickbait narratives of O'Riley saying one thing and a bunch of blogs totally taking it out of proportion and saying a completely different thing. The favourites are, Messi almost signed for Rangers on loan in 2007, and Morelos had 3 bids from every club in the world before he eventually left for absolutely nothing. There's so many examples of just completely ridiculous. And to be fair, I don't think they're siding with one club or another. I think it's just to get the clicks in. And, I think as recent news has shown, I think people are falling for it less and less. And it shows, the growth of fan media shows that, because people are sick of this nonsense. You click on these websites, you get thousands of ads pop up in your face, and you don't really read anything of value. And I like to think that we definitely provide something of value here. Celtic fans talk about Celtic, having a discussion, getting people involved, and I think it's been a brilliant positive to have. And it's only really the last 10 years that stuff like this has came to the fore, and it is good. You can challenge the club, you can challenge the narrative, you can get your voice out there. And it's testament to what you've built, and it's a great alternative to have, especially Keevans, especially Hugh Keevans he's a funny figure to have. You can get a laugh. Every single one of his predictions has turned out to be the total opposite of what ended up happening. I don't take any of his criticism that seriously anymore. Brendan isn't going to walk out because we lost 6-0 in Madrid. We've been absolutely on fire in the league the last couple of weeks and months. Hearts away, Ross County away, Aberdeen at the weekend. We're hitting, I think what Brendan called prime Celtic or peak Celtic, and playing really well, scoring lots of goals. And, I think Rodgers came back because he likes to be here. He likes Celtic, he likes Scotland and Glasgow, and I can't see him walking out anytime soon.
No, absolutely not. And, over the years, we have had so many characters in the Scottish media, commenting on Scottish football, that yesterday we spoke about back in the day when Only an Excuse was a really good product and it was really funny. And the guy behind it, one of the main writers, the main writer was Phil Differ. He's an absolute genius comic. And it's a shame, actually, because, growing up, and I've spoken to JP Mason about this a hell of a lot, a massive part of your memory of watching Scottish football is those voices, those characters and personalities. As much as you might not have liked them, but, they were part of watching football on the telly. Fan media, for me, Patrick, it's strange when you say about a decade, because then I'm going to say as long as that. And then I realise that Acsom's been around for almost 7 years now. And, yeah, for me, there's different fractions. You've got fan media because, like you say, people are just so passionate about Celtic. A Celtic State of Mind preceded the live stream. We used to just record initially at the kitchen table a podcast every single week that you could listen to with your earphones on. And then we decided to go up to a recording studio to try and get the sound and the quality better. And then during the pandemic, when everybody was stuck in the house, we decided, you know what? Let's communicate this way. It still looks a wee bit like a dial-in that you would get at your work, where you have to speak to your boss and all this kind of stuff. And that's going to change. That is in the works. We are changing that as we speak. The whole look of the live stream is going to look different very soon. But there's a few other wee plates spinning at the moment. And one thing I was going to mention is the Martin O'Neill gig. Now, when we go live, like really live, rather than live on a broadcast, Patrick, there's a trepidation because you think, well, will anybody want to come and hear us talking to an ex-Celt? And last year, or this year rather, over the last 12 gigs, it's shown that people do enjoy these types of nights. And we've got one coming up with Johan Mjalby at Gracie's next month. Tickets underneath the video. But with the Martin O'Neill one, we decided, how far can we push this? How big can we take it? Now, by the way, in terms of people thinking it's all about making money, it's not, because obviously you go to a bigger venue, there's massive overheads to put it on. So the Beacon in Greenock was recommended to us by a couple of people, but none more so than Colin Watt, who has been a member of the Acsom team for a long time. And he says, you know what, Greenock could be doing with a big night, a big Acsom night. And I'm like, how big can we take this? Because you imagine, Patrick, when you launch something, and then you're watching the tickets, because you've got a wee app, and you're watching the ticket and you think, will they actually sell? Well, 25 tickets left. It's a 504 capacity venue. 25 tickets left. The chances are that will sell out by the end of today. Unbelievable. But what we're going to do is, as I said before, we're going to improve the broadcast so it doesn't quite look like two squares on a screen. It's going to be looking far more like we're in a studio and we're dialing in people remotely, because not only do we have guys like you, Patrick, we've got people based in Hungary, Australia, Japan, and New Zealand, and Swindon, and Ireland. We've got people based all over the place, such as the diversity of the Celtic fan base. So that's going to improve. And the night out with Martin in January, on the 26th of January, is going to be bigger and better as well. Big screen entertainment, live music entertainment, and a few other wee bits thrown into the mix. So I cannot wait for that. Thank you, everybody, for your support as well. We're going to be talking about narratives over Matt O'Riley, Brendan Rodgers. We're going to be having a look at that transfer window and just how successful or otherwise it's been, and how different it's going to have to be in January. So let's start with that transfer window then. We've spoken about it before, Patrick, excuse me. However, I think it's looking a little bit better now that some of the kind of fringe players have started getting some game time. So I'm not going to include Iwata in this, because Iwata was at the club and it was very much a Maeda. You know, you don't really look at Maeda as a player that came in last season, do you? Because obviously he came in and it was an obligation to buy the player after a short loan deal. Iwata was the same. But I want to start off with Odin Thiago Holm, who came in from Vålerenga, which is a team once managed by Ronny Deila, who worked with Holm, gave Holm his debut, bizarrely enough. And he came in as a 20-year-old Norwegian at £2.5 million. He hasn't started many games, Patrick, but he is, for me, the epitome of a prospect signing done well. He's a guy, with his age, that you're not looking for instant results from. But from what we have seen, I think he's been very, very promising.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. As soon as I seen him, I want to say he came on against Bilbao. It was certainly very, very early on, just before the season kicked off. And I thought he looked really good. As you say, I think he was only maybe 19 or 20 when he signed. He's 20 now. And I was shocked to read that was his first league start at the weekend. I couldn't believe that, because I thought I'd seen loads of him. And obviously, that's just him coming on in games. Just, almost every game he must have came on. Because I feel as if we've seen quite a lot of him already. And, I'm sort of tempted to call him a sort of better version of Beaton. He looks a bit more mobile. He's a great passer of the ball. He can slow the game down. He's very calm, good first touch. And you're absolutely spot on. £2.5 million, one for the future, but already doing well. I think he's a perfect sort of prospect signing. Slotted right into the team, and no real complaints when it comes to that particular summer signing.
No, I would agree with that. And you know what? I've made the bold kind of prediction that he's a long-term replacement for Callum McGregor, because sometimes I'm not sure we're great at doing that. The planning, succession planning, Patrick, was one of the biggest kind of criticisms around Scott Brown being at the helm for so long. And, did he maybe stay a season longer than he should have done in terms of the quality of the performances that he was providing? But it's hard when you've got a captain in place to drop the captain. So, and by the way, I'm not suggesting for a moment that Callum's quite there. I think we've got a good few seasons yet to enjoy Callum McGregor as Celtic captain. But I think Holm is definitely one of the prospect signings that very few Celtic fans will have an issue with. You know, the word projects when talking about signings has almost become a bad word, Patrick. But, you know, there's absolute merit in it. I'll tell you a project signing right now. Liam Scales was a project signing. He was, you know, he came in under Ange Postecoglou in the first season. So what age would he have been? 22, 23 at that time. You're bringing him in from Shamrock Rovers. And I remember I was criticised at the time because, you know, I wasn't looking down at that league, but I was asking the question, can he make the step up to Scottish football? And quite a lot of our Irish fans who know a lot more about Irish football than I do basically said, listen, Paul, you're underestimating the game. The step up's not going to be that difficult for Liam. But, you know, I think, and I absolutely take that on the chin, but I think coming to a club like Celtic's a step up in itself, Patrick. And then you've got the big games against, obviously, Rangers. You've got the big European games. And that surely is a step up. But he's, for me, a great example of a project signing. You know, 500 grand. You're bringing him in from the Irish League, Shamrock Rovers. And it's taken probably 2 years for us to see the real quality in the player. That's a project signing for me. So I'm not tearing up and saying don't sign project signings. I just think that, you know, it looked as though it was wholesale project buys, you know, when we look at that transfer window that's just passed. Would you agree with that on Liam Scales?
Yeah, I would. You know, when he first came in, I think, you know, I'd have totally agreed with yourself. You know, not one for the first team. Can he make the step up? And maybe it is a bit naive because, you know, when you think about it, are Livingston and are Ross County really that much better than, you know, teams in the League of Ireland? Probably not. Probably about the same level. So when you're playing for Celtic against these teams, I suppose the step up isn't that much tougher. I suppose what we are always looking for is, you know, your Champions League and Europa League quality players. And I think that's probably where that sentiment comes from, of can he make the step up? And I'm happy to admit I didn't think Liam Scales was anywhere near good enough for Celtic. I remember a game, Wraith Rovers in the Cup. I think we won 4-0 in the Scottish Cup.
Yeah.
And he actually scored. I think he scored the opening goal, but he played left back and he was shocking that day. I thought, this guy cannot be getting another game for Celtic. And to be fair, I don't think we've played him at left back since. But at left centre back, he's done exceptional this season. You know, I think he was thrown in, I think maybe Aberdeen away. He came on for Carter Vickers. I could be wrong, but you know he's been absolutely exceptional. You know he played Feyenoord away, done really well, and he's sort of never really looked back. And that's one where, you know, we spent money at the time, we didn't get an immediate return, but you know, in an injury crisis 2 seasons later, he's available and he's done really well. And you know, we're probably not buying home to play against Lazio, Feyenoord, and Athletic Madrid. We're buying him to play the 2025-26 Champions League season. Fingers crossed we're there, because he is one for the future, and I think you're spot on with your Callum McGregor prediction. You know, I don't think anyone would have foreseen in 2014 when he was a tricky winger, attacking midfielder, scoring against Legia Warsaw, that Callum McGregor would have replaced Scott Brown in that sort of holding role 6-7 years later, but he has. But I think Holm is certainly a more natural replacement for Callum McGregor. He fits the mould quite well. He comes on from quite a lot. They play a similar game. And yeah, two signings for the future, one of which came good 2 years on, and the other one certainly showing promise just now. And I think will be a great player for Celtic for years to come.
Yeah, that's interesting you mentioned about Callum McGregor, because I've got the same memory of McGregor as a young player coming in. I say young, 21, making his debut under Ronnie Dyler. And I don't know what the archive's like on old Celtic TV, but it would be interesting if you could go back and watch all the games that were obviously streamed live at the time on Celtic TV, all the early performances by Callum McGregor, because he was a different style of player, Patrick, absolutely no doubt about it. And then various managers have come in and made an influence, or had an influence rather, on him. Only Callum McGregor can say who's had the biggest influence, but you know, from the outside looking in, you've seen big changes in him under Brendan Rodgers first time round. And I think when it came to Ange Postecoglou, there's a massive change in that he makes him the captain. So then, you know, that adds another string to his bow, and now we've got the veteran Callum McGregor, who, if you compare it to that young boy that came in, completely different player. You know, he loved a shimmy and he loved all that. And by the way, he loved a European goal. Remember, he scored quite a few European goals in the first couple of campaigns. But yes, we now have a seasoned captain, a skipper, a proper capo in Callum McGregor. Jungle Lion, always quick off the mark. Same old, same old. That's why Celtic supporters are better off listening to Celtic programmes like this. I always remember, as I've said many, many times on this podcast, that my first game was 1987, Patrick. And quite soon after my first game, there was a fanzine launch called Not the View. And at that time, as a young guy, I wanted to buy the Celtic View and read about Paul McStay and Frank McAvenny and whatever. But then this fanzine thing popped up, and I remember seeing it getting sold at the games, and I didn't really know what it was. And then eventually I was at school, and I went to, for summer in my primary school, over in Midlothian, Sacred Heart Primary School, and there was a fellow Celtic fan in that class called Kevin Causer. Haven't seen him since probably 1990, but he brought in a copy of the Not the View, which was a photocopied effort. And, he was way ahead of the curve, this lad, right? And he's like, you need to read this. And I remember he gave me it, right? And I went away home and I was reading it as a young boy at that time. I mean, 87, 88 time. And I'm reading it and getting right into it because they were so ahead of the game. They weren't believing Pravda, as it was called back then. They weren't believing the bones that were getting thrown at them by the club. And they certainly weren't believing the Scottish media. So I guess probably quite early in my Celtic supporting career, I was lucky in that I got introduced to fan media as it was back then. And it was the old fanzines, photocopied and all the rest of it. And I think it's delightful that Not the View and a few of the other guys, Alternative View, More Than 90 Minutes, they still produce a magazine format, a hard copy fanzine, Patrick. I think Celtic have been at the forefront. I think the Celtic fans have been at the forefront of fan media since way back then.
I think so. Yeah, I would totally agree. We've got a rich history of fan media. Obviously, the Celtic View is the longest running club fanzine magazine in football history. But as you say, since the late 90s, the late 80s at least, we've had this rich culture of fan media, and it was necessary to save the club. In the early 90s, in 1994, without it, would we have got Fergus? Would we have got the fans to get the board out, the old board? I suppose we'll never know the answer to that question, but I think they were absolutely vital in saving the club, and I think they're vital now. Acsom and all the other Celtic fan media channels to holding the club to account when we do go and lose 6-0 in a European game, questioning whether it's good enough or not. The lockdown season, the COVID season. Is that good enough? Questioning the manager, questioning the board, the players, the transfer strategy. I think it's important to hold the club to account, but also to celebrate when we do win treble after treble, when we do have big European nights, when we've got these players like Kyogo and Palma. I think it's absolutely brilliant that you can have, just ordinary people just coming together, having a great conversation about Celtic and just sort of celebrating what the club's all about.
It is absolutely pivotal, by the way. And it's bringing to mind a wee comment that I shared with the Acsom team yesterday that we got after the live YouTube video. Thank you very much to Mr. John McGlinchey 8628, who stated the following, because we were quite critical, obviously, of the of various things at the club. I mean, we've been pretty critical over the handling of the Green Brigade, for example. Right, okay, that's going to divide opinion. Of course it is, but it's all about opinion. Anyway, John goes on to say, Patrick, Acsom is a political movement hiding under the blanket of Celtic. We have a magnificent board, and I back 100. Sorry, and I back 100% against the Green Brigade. Good riddance to that nonsense that is the Green Brigade. That is not my quote. I must stress that is the quote of John McGlinchey, who commented. Thank you for your comment, John. But it's interesting, Patrick, that when you question the board, you still have a hardcore, or if you question the manager, as we did in that fateful season, you still have a hardcore of fans that are like, how dare you? How dare you do that? You're not a real Celtic fan if you criticise the club. I think it's the other way about. I think, the very fact that you're trying your best to look at what can we do better, that's all it is, Patrick. That's all it is. You want the best for Celtic, and you question some of these decisions that are made. There was a few others, actually, and I'm pretty sure they're burner accounts after what I said about the board yesterday, right? But there you go, John McClintock. Do you agree with John? Let us know in the comments section. Magnet67. Afternoon Acsom team. And by the way, it proves that I do read all the comments after the event as well. Good afternoon from Rainy Basra. The press are always trying to unsettle us by punting our players, all part of their blue pound loving. Right. I know for a fact, right, that if I got somebody who was very good at writing clickbait headlines, Patrick, we would have even more people tuning into the show and even more people reading the blog. But we're never going to do it. We're just not going to do that, right? Within your headline, yeah, you've got to give a sense of what you're going to discuss. But bearing in mind, I've written taglines, and then because the conversation has gone in diversions all the way through the 60 minutes, we've barely touched on the subject. It's not deliberate. We've obviously written it before the event. But yeah, there is that kind of narrative. And, it brings into focus the Matt O'Riley story, and I use that in inverted commas, that ran the other day there, Patrick. And let's talk about him, because there's loads of comments coming in about Matt O'Riley. And again, arguably, a project player when we signed him.
Definitely. You think back to that time and, we'd lost so many players, players who were guaranteed a move, and we sort of had to sell guys like Ivan Edward to get the money in, and they sort of just run their course anyway. We'd had a disappointing season. You could see they were unhappy. I'm no body language expert, but you could see that these players had their time at Celtic, and we had to cash in, and luckily we did that. And Ange was faced with building a whole new team, and we got players from all over the place. From Russia, from Japan, from England. All over the continent. Ivanovic came from Poland. And, O'Riley, he was a young guy. He was obviously famously second choice to Riley McGree. And we thought, God, we're getting a second choice 20-year-old or 19-year-old or 20-year-old English midfielder. And he's having to come in and he's having to play at Tynecastle. This guy's really been thrown in at the deep end. And he excelled, and he's never really looked back. He might have had a quiet spell towards the middle part of last season where he was struggling to score goals, but by and large he's been absolutely phenomenal. Definitely player of the year for me this season, without a doubt. I think it's if we're going to make a big money sale this summer, it probably would be him if you're picking a player. But every time he does an interview, he's constantly going on about how much he loves Celtic, how he genuinely can't find the words to say how much he loves Celtic. He's commented, I think, on Celtic TV how many Celtic fans his dad has befriended. His dad's pals with half of Glasgow, I'm pretty sure, and goes to all the games. So he's certainly loving life. He's went from being, he was playing regularly, to be fair, at MK Dons. That's why he went there. He's came to Celtic and he's playing regularly for Celtic. He's starring for Celtic, playing in the Champions League. And, he's now made the step up to the Danish national team, who, it's no small feat. Got to the semi-finals of the Euros. Good side. It's obviously been a tough journey for him to getting there. Just look at Kyogo. It took him a few years to get into the Japan side. He's there now. He's constantly getting picked for Japan. And it shows you, what can happen to a player when they come to Celtic, or, what a journey Celtic have been on the last 2 years with these players. And I think as soon as anything good happens, there's a surefire sign that Celtic are doing well when the mainstream press are trying to sell our players for us. And I suppose come summertime, it does us a favour because we get a higher fee. But during the season, when, whether they're trying to stir the pot, get clicks, try and disrupt our rhythm, they're constantly keen to flog our players when they really don't need flogging because they're phenomenal. And if they were to leave, they could go to another league, another club. But O'Riley, he's settled here. He likes Glasgow. By all accounts, loves Celtic, loves playing for Celtic. He's made comments about how much he loves playing for Brendan Rodgers just recently. He's got a freer role. He's scored more goals. So I don't think there's any truth in the matter that he's angling for a move. He's probably enjoying his time with Denmark just now, enjoying his time with Celtic when he comes back, and looking forward to winning more trophies. So I don't think we can read too much into that particular story.
No, and the thing is, again, we're realistic, Patrick. We know that you just need to look down the line of players that have come to this club and been sold the platform. And by the way, loads of them, the thing is, there's no guarantee. Loads of them have failed. Loads of these signings have failed. So many times people come to this football club and tell us that they actually say they're going to use it as a platform. And I think that Mo Bangura, who was mentioned yesterday during our discussion, was one of them. And I believe Kwon, I'd need to double check that. I believe Kwon was talking about playing in the Bundesliga in one of his first interviews. Anyway, we know that players come to Celtic because, they want to progress their career, and they see it as a very good way, either as a stepping stone, having played Champions League football, to go to one of these big half a dozen leagues. We get it. We absolutely get it. But the thing with Matt O'Riley is the frustration, I guess, is he wasn't saying he wanted to leave and all this kind of stuff. He said the exact opposite. He's enjoying life at Celtic, and as you said, his old fellas definitely made friends in Glasgow, and I hear a lot of people talking about him. In fact, I've got to say, there's been 3 people that I've spoken to in the last few months who have been waxing lyrical about Matt O'Riley's father and another in Glasgow. And I love to see people with no real connection to the club embracing Celtic, embracing the fan base. I love all that kind of stuff. I'm wide open to that kind of thing. And we've got a few discussions going on in the comments section. Fabrizio Romano, of course, said about Matt O'Riley that when he leaves the club, he will be a Scottish record transfer. And we know that the transfer, when it comes down to players bought or sold by a Scottish club, has been done twice by Celtic, and it's Kieran Tierney and Jota for 25 million quid. So to put him in that bracket, I'm looking at that thinking, right, it would take an astronomical offer for the club to accept the departure of such a talent. But, if Celtic get offered 25 to 30 million quid, because of where we are in the food chain, because of the country in which we reside in player football, we can't say no. That's always going to be a frustration for me as a Celtic fan, because I hate when we lose quality, and he is definitely that. Plunge McNugget, Alternative View is the best read. Haven't bought the Celtic View for years and never will. I've got to admit, I used to buy a whole lot. All the fanzines, Celtic View, used to buy it all. But I thought that the Celtic View got to a point where they were the victim of instant news, blogs, websites, social media, video, vloggers and all that. And it was only a matter of time, Patrick, before a weekly magazine, which was meant to keep you up to date with Celtic, wasn't going to work. And they've obviously reviewed that, and I think it's now a quarterly, and it's a thick mag with more kind of in-depth content and all that kind of stuff. I thought it should have gone down the kids route. It should have become a kids mag, because kids, as my 6-year-old will be testament to, they still love absolutely skinning you for about a fiver every time you walk into a shop that sells magazines. So yeah, Celtic View could have gone down that route with free hoopy keyrings and all that stuff. Anyway, the Alternative View, yes, I agree. Matt McGlone has done a tremendous job. I remember his first fanzine was called Once a Tim, Always a Tim. And our very own Declan, I'm pretty sure, was a regular contributor to the Alternative View until he got a gig in the mainstream where he goes around telling us the pizzerias that we need to go and visit and the best pint in Glasgow. And Declan's having a whale of a time, isn't he, Patrick, since he's left Acsom?
He's getting paid to visit all the best pubs in Glasgow, all the best restaurants. Every article, it's historic pubs and best tenants, and a new chain's opening up in Bearsden, and he just has to sample it on company funds, and maybe Acsom should start that, going around all the Celtic pubs.
Do you own a pub or a club and you want us to come in and check out your restaurant or cafe, and we can rate it on Acsom? Absolutely, get in touch. Offer a free lunch. Studs Lanigan, Alternative View is a good read. And obviously, tying it right into the fan movements of the early 90s, Matt McGlone was at the forefront of that as well. So brilliant to see that that's still running in, hard copy. More Than 90 Minutes, Big Millish is a good fan mag, really well put together, fantastic quality as well. Now, the Urban Culture comes in to say, in the early 70s, I won the Celtic View quiz. The princely sum of £1 guinea made its way to my wee house. I only seen money like that at the Glasgow Fair. Did you ever appear in the Celtic View? Let us know in the comments section, because I did a couple of times. I've still got the copies as well to prove that. And of course, Jungle Lion has got something to say. Here we go. First issue of the Celtic View came out on the 11th of August 1965, the very day I was born. There you go. The secret's out. And who was behind the Celtic View? None other than John McGinn's granddad, Patrick. But let's not talk about Brendan Rodgers and John McGinn, not at this moment in time. We are having a look back at the transfer window and we're asking the question, was it really as bad as we maybe thought? Odin Holm has been discussed. Next up is Yang. And I think that at the weekend, what we've seen there from Yang was the full repertoire, Patrick, of what he can offer this team. And Brendan Rodgers was really complimentary in his post-match about the player as well.
I've said on here, I'm a big fan of Yang. I thought he tremendous skill, really, really quick. And I thought it was just as he got to the 18-yard box, he really struggled to, sort of produce that final pass, get himself a goal, that last bit of quality. And young player, halfway across the world, big move, big club, just signed. It's obviously going to take time. And I think the frustration from us is we always want to hit the ground running, we want to win every game. We're desperate to win a Champions League game because we've not done it in so long. And I think you can sort of, you can't see the forest for the trees or whatever the saying is. I think I've messed that up, but delighted that he's got his goal. I've been sort of slightly critical of him the last few weeks because it is taking a wee bit of time. He's not had the most amount of game time. He's only had a few starts and he has been lacking that bit of quality in and around the box. But delighted that he's finally got a goal. I've seen a lot of people give him the man of the match on Sunday. Personally, I'd give it to Yang Palmer. But Yang played really well. Obviously got the open goal. Hopefully can just sort of kick on now because obviously Maeda's out for a period. Abada's out until January. Forrest, as much as he can come on and get a goal, I don't think he's the type of player that needs starting for Celtic. I don't think he's got the pace that he once had. Great for popping up with a goal, getting that third and fourth goal, a bit like Turnbull. You need the goals to build the goal difference. But I think as a starter, you're looking at guys like Yang, and I'm glad that he's got his first goal because I'm hoping he can really kick on now. And him and Palmer, it looks like it'll be those two running into the new year before the winter break. So bags of pace, bags of skill. They're both scoring goals now. So another good signing. And I suppose when you're looking at the transfer window, you can only really look at it short, medium, and long term. And we've said about Holm, he's certainly get pass marks for short, medium term. He's certainly one for the long term. But I think short term we're all a bit frustrated because we weren't getting those wins in Europe. We were put out the League Cup. We were sort of stuttering a bit. We weren't playing the best football in the world in the league. So I think short term we're all quite frustrated because it's the nature of our transfer business. We buy, young players for the future for a year or two, sell them on, and to come in and hit the ground running as a young person, it's very difficult. But now, after a few months in the medium term, as we begin to back up the points in the league, you can see that we've signed, certainly promising players, if not real quality, in Yang, Holm, Palmer, and hopefully we can kick on now for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and also hopefully some of the others. We've not seen the aforementioned Kwon Ortilio, Nawrocki and Lagerbielke came in and have gone and fallen off the side of the earth, if you're a flat earther, fallen off the radar. Let's just keep it like that. That's a different discussion altogether. Loads of great comments coming in. Bit of nostalgia this week, obviously. It's International Week, so if we're going to digress and talk about fanzines and all that, now's the time. The urban culture, is Lager Top still a thing? Well, Lagerbielke definitely still is, but we don't know where he is. The urban culture. We're going to be asking that question in just a few moments. Paul McLean, when Saturday Comes was the best fanzine outside of Not The View. It was brilliant, that mag, so much so that it ended up in the mainstream, Menzies and newsagents and all that kind of stuff. And they used to run a table of top selling fanzines in Britain. And they used to do that at the back of the mag, and Not The View was up in the top 5 regularly, really punching above its weight back in the day. Uncle Nobby's Steamboat Acsom should bring out a weekly mag. What type of mag? Let us know. And also the urban culture. Bridie Forfer was a great contributor to Not The View. There were some brilliant contributors. I even contributed back in the day, believe it or not. Read all the small print, you'll find my contributions. For those who thought I started supporting Celtic just to get a podcast off the ground, no, Not The View. Late 80s, early 90s, I'm in there. Stevie Boy, only football tabloid I liked or bought. Panini sticker album, part of your youth. And again, I mentioned this yesterday about kids and my boy's generation, and are they going to get into Scottish football and all this kind of stuff? And a big part of that was, Panini stickers and all that, and it's now like with cards and everything else, Patrick, it's all geared towards the superstar blockbuster. I call it WWF football, which is the English game. And, everybody knows about Barcelona, Real Madrid and English teams. And we need to try and get away from that. And we've also got Thomas Ross, who had a couple of Celtic poems published in the View. There you go. Who else was in the Celtic View? Let us know in the comment section. I used to love it. I used to love the View because obviously it kept you abreast of current affairs. And obviously loads of the letters that were written in were fake. The board wrote the letters that were printed in the Celtic View. And they went by names like John McGlinchey, who commented on our video yesterday. So we've been talking about Home and Yang as well. I mentioned the lesser seen Tillio and Kwon. Where are we with them? I know that Tillio had an injury, Patrick, but we're at that stage where you're thinking, right, Tillio cost us £1.5 million, Kwon cost us £1 million. £2.5 million would get you a Matt O'Riley 2.5 seasons ago. Doesn't it look at this stage like it's money well spent?
No, I was quite excited with Marco Tillio. Melbourne City Football Group. There's an obvious connection. There's an obvious success rate there with their signings. You watch his highlights. Really skillful player. I'm casting my mind back a bit, but maybe not the fastest winger in the world, but certainly very skillful. The type of guy that creates a lot of goals, sets his teammates up. And I was dead excited to see him. And then in his press conference, he goes, "Oh no, I'm injured, and I'm injured for a few months." And I'm fairly certain he's back in training. I could swear that he's fit, and he just hasn't been anywhere near the squad. And I think Narowski's the same. Obviously we've seen Narowski a wee bit. He's played 2 league games, played a couple of friendlies. He seemed to be the preferred partnership, him and Carter Vickers at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
But I'm still excited to see Tillio. It's just a question of is he fit? And I've long had a bugbear with Celtic doing this. I seen a few years ago Arsenal releasing a list of their injured players, how long they're going to be out for, expected time to come back, and I think Celtic should start doing that. I know certain managers like to keep their cards close to their chest, a wee surprise in there. I know Ange done it with Kyogo a few times, but I'd just like full clarity on when players will be back. As for Kwon, Lagerbielke's another one that's fallen off the face of the earth. I think I've spoken about him a few times recently. He didn't have the best start. He never really was a standout. And then I think after one of the international breaks, he's just been nowhere to be seen since. So it's a big question mark. He got I think he got Defender of the Year in the league that we bought him from, the Swedish league. So obviously got something about him, just not shown it yet, not been given the chance yet. As for Kwon, I don't like to write a player off too early, but he played against Wolves in that friendly in Dublin, played against Bilbao, and I thought it was absolutely mince. I thought it was absolutely rotten. As I say, I don't like writing a player off too early, but I couldn't see anything that any sort of quality feature about him. As I say, don't want to write him off, but misplacing passes, easy for me to say, quite slow, quite tall by all accounts. I don't know if he's physical or not, but that's another one who I don't even think he's picked up an injury. I just think he's sort of hidden in the long grass somewhere, just absolutely nowhere to be seen. So there's a few players that there's questions over. Obviously, I think Narowski's fit and been in training for a few weeks, and again, nowhere near the squad. So there's 4 or 5 players you could point to and say, well, look, signed them all relatively recently, and they're nowhere to be seen. So that's another question about the transfer window.
It's a worry. It is a worry, and there's a comment coming in about the fact that you can't play them all. That's right, and then that opens up the whole other discussion of what do you do with that group of players. And you could throw Mikey Johnson in there. He has played 1 game of football this season for Celtic, a substitute appearance against Hibs. He's 24 years old. That's not enough football, Patrick. James McCarthy, he's not playing football. When was the last time he played for Celtic? Last February? Was it? Something like that? I mean, these people need to be playing. And they might not even be part of your kind of future plan, but if you can't offload them on a permanent deal due to their wages, length of contract, etc., we need to get them out on loan, because there's nowhere else for them to play, Patrick. We don't have a reserve team. They can't play in the B team. There needs to be something more long-term, and we have spoke about that, and there's probably a whole podcast in it. What is that? What does it look like? Do you get the top 4 or 5 teams in Scotland who would still be willing to make that investment in a reserve team, and have a core group of teams who can then marry up with other clubs and play some kind of tournament throughout the season, so that at least they're playing games? I mean, 25 games at that level would be better than none. And, they're picking up their wages. Their state of mind wouldn't be great. It's going to take them a long time to get back up to speed. You spoke about Yang earlier on. Yang's had to not only adapt to just coming to a new country and playing football for Celtic, he's had to adapt to the crowd that he's obviously witnessing at Celtic Park and the demands of that crowd. He's having to come to terms with going to away grounds and getting booed every time he kicks the ball, which has happened at Motherwell and Ross County. The roughhouse tactics, he's had to come to terms with that. I mean, he got taken off with an injury to his eye. So there's all of these things to consider. And the only way you can come to terms with it or test yourself is to play games. Go on until you haven't kicked the ball. They've not kicked the ball. And this period of time has now elapsed where you start to wonder, if we got another Daniel Arzani on our hands here, are these players going to play? And if they're not, then it's quite an obscene waste of money, actually. I think they need to go out in January on loan. The Urban Culture, international break, bad news Celtic story. It makes winning all the sweeter. Yeah, you could set your clock by it, couldn't you? And the Tobago Street Police Station Celtic Supporters Club membership means, if you have spent a night in the cells, you are a member of the club. Lawrence Conley tells me he is already a member. Right, is O'Riley the smartest player on the park? I think probably both on and off the park. Very intelligent footballer. But as Patrick said, when he speaks, you listen. He's very, for me, balanced in his views. And I think that he's very determined. You spoke about, leaving Fulham without a contract. Patrick, he had no contract lined up. He was without a club for a number of months. He goes to MK Dons. What a risk. The level of self-belief you would need to have had at that age and at that time, pandemic time, to be without a club is a sensational level of self-belief, and it's paid off. And look at him now. They're talking about him being a record Scottish transfer. What an unbelievable story. Joe Hamilton, good afternoon, troops. Matt is intelligent and he knows what Brendan can do for him. I agree with that. I think similarly, I know it didn't end well, but remember Moussa Dembele, Patrick? He could have gone to a number of clubs. He comes to Celtic. It was a smart move. Him and his agent, it was a very, very good decision, because he wanted probably at that stage to be that player for Lyon or Atletico Madrid, but he knew that if he was to come to a club like Celtic, who would offer him a platform and he would work under a manager like Brendan Rodgers, eventually he would get that move, and he did. So very, very intelligent, as Joe has mentioned there in his decision-making. Magnet 67, we were right about all clubs' money, and we are right about their penalties and VAR assistance cheating. However, they still can't catch us. That says loads as well. After all that, they still cannot catch us. Some brilliant points coming through. Thanks, everybody, for sharing your views. Michael, as you say, they can't all play, but what is the alternative? What do we do as a football club to make sure they're playing games, if not for the first team, then somewhere? They've got to play. And Uncle Nobby Steamboat, an alternative view type mag, not a scud mag. Okay, thanks for clearing that up. And we've also got Brown Warrior coming in response to that. Bring out a mag of Palma's best shots. Call it the Palma Sutra. Honestly, this is the level of wit and humour that we get in the comments section, and that is why I loved fanzines so much back in the day. They were so funny and on point every single time. And I bet at that time, a lot of the humour went over my head. I should probably go back and read them again. Mike Norowski and Gustav Lagerbielke, let's talk about the pair of them. As you said, Lagerbielke just got Defender of the Year for his former club, Elfsborg, in that particular division. £3 million purchase and 4.3 or 4.5, depending on the reports, for Nawrocki. It's a big investment in the central defensive area of the park for both players not to even be in the squad half the time. Patrick, where are we with these two guys?
Yeah, it's a big question. Lagerbielke, as I was saying, certainly not a fan favourite, made a few mistakes by all accounts, good in the air, sort of a similar profile to Starfelt, tall, strong, not the best passer of the ball. No, sorry, I've got that wrong. Lagerbielke is meant to be a good passer of the ball, but he's just quite prone to a mistake. Certainly since he's came to Celtic, you just haven't had full confidence in him. And we're obviously going through a sort of period of change when he was playing in the team, but from what I can tell, he's not been injured. There's been no news of an injury. He just seems to be absolutely nowhere near the team. And, it would be a good question to ask the manager just to find out where he is. As people are saying, you can't play them all, but certainly as of the summer, you'd have played him ahead of Scales. Obviously, time has passed since then. Scales is probably above him in the pecking order, but to be nowhere near the team is quite incredible. Narowski, was injured for a few months. I'm sure, I don't know if I'm suffering from the Mandela effect. I'm sure I read somewhere that he was back in training and fit and ready to play, but again, nowhere near the squad. So really not sure what's going on there. Like someone to ask Brendan that question in a press conference, because it really is a sort of big question mark along with Tilly and Kwon. To have signed these 4 guys in the summer to not be in the squad at all, that is a bit of a worry. That we've wasted money, because as you say, we've signed Tilly for what was it, 2 million almost, Kwon for 1 million, Narowski 4.5, Lagerbielke I'm sure was 2 or 3. That's a lot of money. That's you're talking, what is it, 10 million or something over, to not even be in the squad. Especially when you're at a club like Celtic, every August to December you're playing 2 games a week. So to not have new signings in the team when you're paying 3, 4, 5 million, that is a bit of it's a big question mark. So slightly concerning. It's not affected our form, certainly not domestically. So that's one positive. But as you said, Mikey Johnson comes on for 20, 30 minutes against Hibs. It's his only appearance of the season, albeit at a back injury, out for the first couple of months. But we've not seen him since, and that was 2 or 3 weeks ago now. 24-year-old has to be playing football. If these guys are fit, they're all quite young. I think, I want to say Narowski's the oldest of them. They all need to be playing.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have guys not even on the bench when they're in that sort of development stage of their career. And, Mikey Johnson's another one where you're probably looking at a loan, or as you say, like a reserve league, because these guys need to be playing. And as much as I'm one of the few Mikey Johnson fans left, I think, in the Celtic support, but for about 3 seasons we've been saying it's his last chance, and I think it really is his last chance, because we're talking about James McCarthy, we're talking about guys like Kwon, guys like famously the duo Barkas and Ayeti, big fees, taking up wages, not contributing at all. James McCarthy, as you say, I don't think he's played in over a year. It's quite incredible the amount of money we're wasting in wages here. So I would like us to streamline the squad somewhat. I think the Champions League squad is 26, and most years we don't use all 26 players. So it shows that we don't need this many players in the team. So I'd like us to streamline that going forward, and hopefully we can see these 2, 3 players that we haven't seen in months, if at all, because it's quite a big question mark.
It is, and every time I bring it up, I do get faced with the counter argument that nothing is guaranteed in the transfer market, and I know it isn't. And I've also said that that 10 million quid you've just spoken about there that's been shelled out on how many players? 4 players. I would rather buy 5 million pound players, and the answer to that is what? Ayeti and Barkas? No, not Ayeti and Barkas. I get that there's no exact science to it, but in terms of the hit rate has gone down. Let's go take a step back. Billy McNeil takes over 1987, 88. His hit rate had to be absolutely on point because we had to win the league because it was our centenary season, and he never made a bad signing. Martin O'Neill comes in many years later, and his hit rate had to be really high because he had a 21-point swing. Rangers had won the league by 21 points the season before, and I don't think he made a bad signing in that first season. Fast forward to Ange Postecoglou, he takes over after the pandemic season, the COVID season, and his hit rate had to be high, and it was. It's almost as if it doesn't have to be, we get a wee bit complacent and we start tinkering, and it's a wee bit more experimental. Let's take a few of the guys now. And this is the result of it. You've got £10 million worth of players that we're not seeing. Most of them are not in the squad, and it is a bit of a concern. Next time we get into the press conference, I'm going to ask maybe Jerry to ask that question. of his pal Jerry, Brendan Rodgers, who called him a top goalkeeper. Brian McGinty, O'Riley is an old head on young shoulders. Is that why he likes Aerosmith? That's the big question, Brian. That's my first question if I ever meet Matt O'Riley. Uncle Nobby Steamboat, looking forward rather to seeing an actual Brendan signing. Yeah, that would be good. Absolutely. And of course, we brought in Nat Phillips, short-term deal, and he's not really played either. Chill Pill, I think Brendan has hinted that Tillio is struggling. I'm not sure if he'll ever make it at Celtic. And even that, when you look at that, he's struggling. Is he struggling mentally, being away from home? Is he struggling to, make an impact? Is it a step up? Is that what he's struggling with, performance, or is it more mental? You just never know with a lot of these guys. And that would be a real shame for a player like Tillio to come over so highly rated and for us not really to see him. I know that he played in the B-team game against Michael Moffat's heir in the testimonial. But other than that, we've not seen him in action, which is a shame. Marquis, is Musa still commenting on our game since Brendan Rodgers came back in? By the way, I'm not sure if he is. That would be interesting if he did, or whoever runs his account. I'm not sure if they have. Let us know in the comments. And we've also got Mamansis, rather. Scotland needs to bring back the reserve league. It was followed up by AG saying, how about a reserve league with other teams around England and Wales? Would that work? Would they allow that to work? That's the thing. Would the associations allow that to happen? Sounds good to me. We need to get the players playing games. And Robert Highland with a real Not The View throwback. McGlinchey is a malcontent. If you know, you know. Thank you very much for all your comments. It really is appreciated. And then it takes us on to, we've spoken about Nat Phillips and Paulo Bernardo. 2 loan signings, Patrick. I think Bernardo's shown us a bit. He's shown us a bit that you might be interested in him at the end of the season. I'm not sure about the £6 or £7 million that I've seen quoted. If he was a £3.5 million purchase, then perhaps. Nat Phillips, as things stand, will go back to Liverpool, I think. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, Phillips, I think, is quite an easy one. I think he was signed. With the derby in mind, and he rocked up injured. So I think that was the beginning and end of his Celtic career before he even signed in the dotted line. No, we're not going to sign that Phillips. I think that's quite clear. I think we've spoken on here. He's on about 60 grand a week. Obviously, Liverpool can afford to pay that, but we'd struggle to give Callum McGregor that sort of money. So he's not playing for Celtic. When it comes to Bernardo, as you say, we've got a lot of football still to play. We've got at least 2 European games, get hopefully 5 Scottish Cup games and 25 odd league games. So a lot of games to go. But I've actually not heard that fee quoted yet. I'm sure there probably is a fee agreed between Benfica and Celtic, but if it's anywhere near that sum, I don't think we'll be paying that, because I think by the middle of November, Jota was a superstar already for Celtic, and we were all chomping at the bit to spend £6.5 million on him. Whereas Bernardo, he's done okay in parts. He played well against Atletico at home, but apart from that, I think he'll just be a squad player for the rest of the season. I mean, when Hatate got injured, that was his big chance, wasn't it? And we've ended up playing home against Aberdeen on a Sunday, so I don't think Bernardo's one for the future. He could turn into a superstar in January and February, but I don't think that's one that we'll be making permanent. But it's nice to see us use the loan system in that way, because we've seen from Carter Vickers and Jota, and Maeda and Awata are slightly different because there was an obligation to buy. We effectively signed them, but Carter Vickers and Jota agree a nominal fee before they even kick a ball, and then if they're good, you're happy to pay the money. And I think that's a good way of working it, because in the past it really has been a scattergun approach. You think of guys like Colin I think Kazim Richards was a loan. He might have been a permanent signing. I was going to say Carlton Cole, but I think that was permanent as well. There's no doubt been a few dodgy loans. My memory escapes me. Obviously, Patrick Roberts, I think City were wanting over 10 million for him, and as much as he was a great player, I don't think we're ever going to pay that. So I'm glad we're sort of working a better system now. We've got a system in place for using the loan option.
Without a doubt. I think under Dyla it was guys like John Guidetti, Tonev, Wakaso, Inga Berget, and it was all just plugging gaps. It was just short-termism. And then we had that window where it was Timo Weah, Charlie Masonda, Ollie Burke, that type of player, Toyan. We never really had any intention of buying any of these guys. So if you bring someone in and there is that prospect of, what, they may be a player for the future, then I think it's far more long-term view than the short-termism with all the guys I've just mentioned there. Bajel Kaduri was another one. Remember him? He came in, scored against Rangers. Remember him? Short-term loan deals, and we'll not talk about John Joe Kenny. But finally, just to give us all a bit of confidence, the final player I want to talk about is the man, Palma, who is doing his best to help us get over the loss of Jota. What a performance at the weekend. A hat-trick of assists. He scores a penalty, which nobody else in the squad's capable of doing. And he was just sheer class, Patrick. He was brilliant.
It was, it's funny, you've got all these different goal scorers and you think, well, he only really scored a penalty. And then you go on the BBC page and you see that he's actually got 3 assists as well. So 4 goal contributions. People would be making compilations and raving for weeks about Messi if he'd done that. And rightly so, because Messi's amazing. But, under the radar, maybe not under the radar, because you could see on the day he was phenomenal. But, he never scored an outstanding goal or anything, but still really contributing quite a lot to the team. The outside of the foot for O's first goal is absolutely exquisite. He looks like Luka Modric when he does it, because Luka Modric absolutely loves that type of pass, that type of goal. And certainly in terms of numbers, I seen a stat on Twitter a few days ago. In terms of goals and assists, he's actually creeping up on Jota's tally last season. I think Jota got 15 goals and 12 assists last season. And I don't think Palma's even that far away. I know that's 27 in total, but bearing in mind it's only middle of November, I think he's doing quite well to catch him up. Has he got the flair of Jota? Probably not. He's fast. He's got a few tricks up his sleeve. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a player as skillful as Jota anywhere in Europe, because he really was. He really was phenomenal. But in terms of numbers, he's done really, really well. And to have got a guy from the 5th best team in Cyprus and have him replace the superstar from Portugal is phenomenal business for only, I think it was 3 million we signed him for. And delighted to have him in the squad because he's doing really, really well. He's I think him and Kyogo are probably the only 2 that could compete with Matt O'Riley for Player of the Year, I reckon, because they're both having great seasons. And long may it continue.
Yeah, absolutely. He was brilliant. And like you say, we're going to be looking at that at the end of the season and asking the question, was he more productive? As you say, maybe not as creative, but was he as productive as Jota? And that would be interesting if he was, when you look at the price that we paid for the player as well. And obviously it wasn't good enough for Michael Beale, but he's second best for us, no problem. I will bring you on. That goes back to that tagline again, the nonsense that is printed in the mainstream media. And by the way, there's plenty of nonsense in alternative media as well. Don't get me wrong. But thank you, everybody, for getting involved. In the comment section, as I said before, we pushed the boat out. We got Martin O'Neill. We went to a big venue and we were 25 tickets away from selling it out. Crazy, crazy numbers. If you fancy coming along for a brilliant, entertaining night, then click on the link underneath this video. There's not many tickets left. Thank you, everybody, for getting involved. And thank you again, Patrick McGill, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.